It was a Saturday night, late night, just before the recruiting officers were going to close up. It was a small hall in Edson, Alberta, and that was a Legion Hall, or built for a Legion Hall. So the gang of us all hanging around outside it. We were, I think what it was, if I would guess it was, is that we were questioning people that came out of the recruiting office. Did you join up the Army or Air Force? What did you join up for? And just general, because we were all gang. We were all played hockey together. We played ball together. Went to school together. So we were interested. Maybe they were in a grade above us or grade below us, but we did learn. And a bunch of my friends went in to join. And I said, well, golly, I'm not going to be left behind. I'll join up too. So I did. I signed for Army service, and going home, I went home to tell my father. He was reading the newspaper, and I can remember him sitting at the chair reading the newspaper, and I said, he never raised his eyes, and I said, Dad, I just joined up. Don't know what else I said. I just told him that I had joined the forces, and he raised his paper up like that to hide his face, and I could see his hand just shaking like this. I guess he was either sobbing or whatever it was, because he'd been in the First World War and was wounded badly, and when they cremated his body, they found 3 pieces of metal in his body. Shrapnel. These are small pieces of shrapnel. That's pieces of bomb is what they are, bombs that shatter, blow to little small pieces. And so my tour of duty took me to, I never got home after I went to Edmonton. I never got leave or anything like that to say goodbye to my folks. I went down to Ormstown, Quebec for basic training. Ormstown is south of Montreal. And there was a big basic training camp. Not a big one, it was a small basic training camp. Why we were sent there, I had no idea. It was an infantry training, for infantry training. And then from there, I went to Kingston to learn signals. I went to a signal school and spent time there. And then from there, I went to Petawawa for survey training, and I was with the 1st Canadian Survey Regiment all throughout the war. Spent my entire 5 years with them. And that 5 years was, to me, as far as companionship, we made good friends. We were looked after one another. We were, our troop, 10-man troop, were flash spotting troop. And flash spotting was the spotting of machine gun posts, any like sniper fire that was troubling our troops. Then we would attempt with our 1st Survey Regiment to get a reading on the exact location of the building and either put down a mortar shell on them or whatever. So, because you just don't shoot at, take a bunch of shells and put them in a gun and start firing into the enemy lines. You have to have a target, because you don't want to waste ammunition. Every time you fire off a cannon shell or any kind of a shell, you're firing off money. It's got to be built. It's got to be back here in Canada or wherever your manufacturing depots are. It takes time to build these things. So anyways, I spent the 5 years with that troop when we went to we were shipped from Petawawa, where we were survey training, artillery. It's an artillery base, training center. We went from Halifax. Took us 6 days to go across the ocean because they had to zigzag to miss all the U-boats. It was a convoy of supply ships and troop ships, and you're all so far apart in the old, and even at night, you've got so many minutes, right? You've got to be right on the dot. You make your turn to go this way for, say, 20 miles, and then you turn and go this way, and then keep doing that all night long to miss the U-boats, the submarines that would be waiting for you out there, the enemy, were waiting to fire on any ship that come along to send them to the bottom. So we were in England 2 years, guard duty on the south of England, because Germany at the time were building, not at that time when we first got over, but they started to build barges and vessels, landing vessels, to invade the coast of Britain. So we were on, our Canadian troops were on the south coast of England guarding the south coast. All the way along from Littlehampton, Southampton, Devon, and, or not Devon, West Worthing, Brighton, all through the Hove. We were stationed there. It would take us back inland for training and make us change our shoulder patches to a different color, and then we'd be convoying through the country. And the next, maybe 2 weeks later, make us change and put our patches back. Because we had to do our own sewing, we had to sew those on ourselves. And some fellows would get them on crooked, and we'd try to get them on as straight as possible. The idea of that was, while we were in England, it was spies. There were spies amongst the English people that were sending information back to Germany. How many troops there were, to get some idea, to give the Germans, they would get an idea of where the weak part of the coast would be, so they could invade that weak part. So it was called the Fifth Columnists. The spies were called, and so that was our job, anyways, the guarding of the south coast, and training schemes on special schemes. If the enemy should land, we could move in on them and control their movement and stop them and send them maybe back into the ocean. After a time, that was Germany, for some reason or other, they lost interest because they were involved in the North Africa campaign, using people there, and there was quite a battle in North Africa, and then Russia. They had taken on Russia as well. They had too many things going on, so they sort of forgot about the landing in Britain. After the North Africa campaign, were the British troops stopped Rommel. Rommel, the famous German general that was in Africa at the time, stopped him, and they pulled out of Africa. And so we were sent from England to, our group was, we weren't direct. We went to Africa form up the landing on Sicily, and which we did. The landing on Sicily, we were the second wave going in, and the first wave, I lost a school chum. On the first wave, we learned maybe a year later, I don't know how many months, or maybe it was only a month later or a month later, I learned that Gus and I, who had joined together, schoolboys together, Gus or myself found out or heard about it from home, a letter, and Bill Fowler had died, stepped off a landing barge and gone to the bottom with all his equipment on. He couldn't release it, and so he could float back up to the surface. And 5 of them died drowned before they ever got ashore in Sicily. And that was a 34-day campaign. If you look it up in your internet, I think it's it would be mentioned, a 34-day campaign. We lost, I think, 380 or something like that who were killed, and a lot more than that injured. That was our first taste of battle in Europe. So consequently, when D-Day came around, we were called the D-Day Dodgers. I have a T-shirt in there that's got D-Day. I was a D-Day Dodger, and there was a song came out by Lady Astor. She called us the D-Day Dodgers, that were having a great time swimming in the Adriatic in the subtropics area. And so someone wrote a song in the D-Day, we were the D-Day Dodgers in sunny Italy. And I never put my foot in the ocean all the time I was there, but they'd have it mined. You know, sometimes they'd put minefields, the Germans, thinking we'd go out there to swim or something. So we Canadians went up the Adriatic coast pretty well. The only time we were in the west coast, the Mediterranean coast, was the Anzio landing. And we did have a few troops on that, and that was all. Coming up through Italy, we lost very few of our regiment, very few men, but my wife's brother, who came to us as a reinforcement, he was killed one night. I was sleeping. I was a machine gunner, a Bren gunner, but I was up with this post. Two other fellows that were on the instruments. Apparently, as I say, I was sleeping. I didn't know what was going on. They noticed these flashes go off in the darkness, and the other post, one of the other posts saw it as well, and they got a kind of a bit of a bearing on where it would be, and decided it was within our own lines. And we found out the next day that it was three of our boys had stepped on either a mine or got a mortar shell. We never did learn. It could have been a mortar shell, but flashes went off. The next day we heard they were buried. The stretcher bearers would go in and pick up the bodies, and the enemy would cease fire until I don't know how the signals was done, how they get to know those sort of things. There must have been some way. Then picked up the bodies, and they were buried, and then we learned the next day an officer and a sergeant apparently was at the service, because in later years, reading some mail that my future at the time, I didn't know Jack had a sister. He never told us that he had a sister. He was with us, our 10-man troop, and he was one that was killed. Coming up to relieve our post with two other fellows. So we were stuck in there for another day, and we were hungry. We only had of rations for one evening. And so in the pitch blackness, the infantry would take us out and bring the other group back in, or they'd bring the group in, relieve our post, and we'd leave. This didn't happen. And Jack, when I got back to Canada after the war, I might as well put this in now, when I got back after the war years, I went, it was about 2 years, approximately 2 years after the war was over. I was working in the area of Wetaskiwin, Alberta, and I thought, well, I'll go in there and just stop and express my condolences to the Vassars. So I knocked on the door, told her who it was. Oh my gosh, we know you. We've heard about, Jack wrote about you, and we knew about a Bob McDonald, and come on in. And so I did. And then after a while, my future mother-in-law, Jack's mother, I was doing my laundry. I was working on the oil rigs, and she was cleaning my laundry, and then I picked them up on my days off. This time she had her daughter home, and I didn't know they had a daughter. And so here was a lady sitting at the kitchen table next to the window reading a book, and I came in, knocked on the door, and Miss Fassett and got it inside. She said, Bob, I'd like to introduce you to our daughter, Frances, and this is Bob McDonald I've been telling you about, Frances. She looked up from her book and said hello, and then went back reading. So anyway, she went back reading. I picked up my laundry and spoke to her for a little while, and my Frances' mother said, that would be my mother-in-law, said, Frances, you're going back to the city. Bob's going that way. I was in another room, would you like to go, Bob, to take you? He said he would certainly take you back home to Edmonton, because Wetaskiwin's just south of Edmonton by 60 miles, I think it is. And she said, oh, sure. So I had an open Jeep, and it was cold, late fall, almost winter, and in German, and nothing happened. And I was going to fire off another shot, and I said, come out, surrender, whoever you are. And anyways, they came out. It was a tall man. He was the oldest. The rest were all young men of maybe 17, 16. The boy, the last one came out, was only 14 years old. At that, they were using anyone they could. It was short of help, so they couldn't get any more recruits, because they were fighting the Russian front as well. In Russia, that was a big front. They had a heck of a lot of men there. Anyways, they came out, and I can remember the officer then came down and walked around, and so we marched them back to where our vehicles were kept, and our phone base. I guess I could call it headquarters. That was where the big plane table was, where they had the maps, and that when we took a reading, they could calculate out from that readings where we get a trisection. There's a shell go off at night, we can catch the flash, and we get points, and we get a trisection that way, and bring shell fire down, an accurate fire. Anyways, after relieving them, I took the message up to the post. At this time I had a rifle, but one of the little boys, he was just 14, yeah, he was 14, and he was crying, and I put my arm around his shoulder. I said, you're going to be okay, okay. And I said that in sort of German, the words and I forgot them now, what it meant by you're going to be safe. He stopped, he kept going like this with his eyes, with his hands. He thought he was going to be shot. Their propaganda says, you're not going to be taken prisoner, they'll shoot you. They were teaching these little boys not to give up. And that's how the propaganda amongst the enemy was like that. Germany was desperate. They didn't have any more men to spare, so they were using all these young schoolboys. And it was a terrible shame. So the older man, he was looking after these four younger fellows as an infantry. So they didn't have any weapons with them. So they got left behind because the German line had moved. They didn't get the message to move their post, whatever they were, a defensive post. The line moved, and we overran the line, and they were left behind. And that's how we captured them. One episode. Another episode was in the middle of the night, a black, dark night. It was winter night in Italy. When it's a winter night in Italy, it's dark and it's cold. And we were in this building. We had no furniture. You're sleeping on the floor, hard concrete floor, the best you can. When you're tired, you sleep on anything. So I Paddy Walsh, my sergeant, woke me up and said, "Bob, you're needed." I didn't ask why. Finally, he talked. He says, under the candlelight, he lit this candle, and there was a little girl there. He says, "There's some trouble in this house. Can you figure out what it is?" And so she says about the young femme. She was going to have a baby, bambino, and going to be born. A bambino, of course. I can't remember the Italian words for it now. They would come back to me because occasionally I got 4 Italian families just live in this street right here, and sometimes language comes back to me. And so after living there for a year and some, you got along in the language, picked up and started to speak and make the Italian people understand. If you're hungry, you're going to ask for can you spare a chicken or can you spare an egg? Very few of that along because the Germans had taken all the livestock and all the chickens with them. I got my hand on this little girl's shoulder, and Patty, I can remember say, "Who are you going to take?" I said, "I'll take Ivan." So Ivan woke him, and he thought the world of me. For some reason or other, he looked up to me, Ivan Baines. And he was a timid fellow, and we called him Andy Devine, because Andy Devine on our movies and that was a coarse voiced fellow. He had this funny voice, that very coarse voice. So